During the peak of the Colorado Gold Rush, a man named R.U. Darby struck what looked like a massive vein of gold ore. He quietly covered up the find, raised the money for mining machinery, and set to work digging out his fortune. But after extracting just a few carts of ore, the vein vanished. Darby and his crew kept digging, hoping to pick up the trail, but they eventually hit a wall of solid rock. Exhausted and in debt, Darby sold all of his heavy machinery to a local junk van for a few $100s and took a train home. This cross-section diagram illustrates what happened next. The junk man hired a mining engineer to inspect the abandoned site. The engineer calculated that the vein hadn't actually disappeared. It had simply shifted along a geological fault line. According to his math, the gold picked right back up exactly 3 feet past where Darby had stopped digging. The engineer was right. The junk man pulled millions of dollars in ore out of that mine, all because he sought expert counsel instead of accepting a temporary roadblock. This raises a difficult question. Why do perfectly capable people surrender their ambitions at the first sign of friction, while others manage to pull off seemingly impossible feats with far fewer resources? Napoleon Hill spent 25 years analyzing the wealthiest people of his era to answer that exact question. He identified a specific mental architecture as the primary driver of their success, a burning desire that refuses to acknowledge the word impossible. Take Edwin C. Barnes. When Barnes arrived at Thomas Edison's laboratory in New Jersey, he looked like a penniless tramp. He didn't have the money for a proper train ticket, but Barnes carried a singular obsession. He didn't travel to New Jersey to ask for a job working for Edison. He intended to partner. Barnes mentally cut off all his escape routes. He told himself he would stay in that laboratory and pursue that goal until he achieved it. He took a low-paying job at the lab, biding his time for years. Eventually, Edison invented a dictating machine that his own sales force refused to sell, claiming it was unmarketable. Barnes immediately volunteered, sold the machines across the country, and ultimately secured a national distribution contract that made him a millionaire partner of the greatest inventor on Earth. Barnes reached this height by engineering a state of psychological obsession. By burning every boat behind him, he made success his only viable physical option. We see this same mental architecture scale up to bend physical reality. When Henry Ford decided he wanted to cast an 8-cylinder engine block in a single piece of metal, his engineers uniformly told him the design was physically impossible to manufacture. Ford ordered them to do it anyway. 6 months passed with no results. Another 6 months passed. The engineers insisted it couldn't be done, but Ford maintained his strict command until they finally discovered the casting method to make the V8 engine a reality. This psychological mechanism applies equally to macroeconomics. At the turn of the 20th century, a 38-year-old steel executive named Charles M. Bilson. Schwab decided to consolidate the American steel industry. During a private dinner in New York, Schwab delivered a 90-minute speech outlining his vision. He didn't rely on complex financial spreadsheets. He leaned entirely on his absolute conviction to persuade J.P. Morgan, the most powerful and intimidating financier of the era, to fund an outrageously expensive consolidation. Morgan agreed. Schwab's obsessive presentation successfully manifested the United States Steel Corporation out of thin air, a conglomerate valued at over $1 billion. In both cases, a dominating thought acted as an inescapable forcing function. A fixed psychological goal consistently overwhelms the perceived boundaries of engineering and finance. Napoleon Hill termed the software running behind these successes autosuggestion. It is the process of deliberately feeding specific, focused commands into your own mind. This flowchart of the brain highlights a core vulnerability in how we process information. The subconscious mind cannot differentiate between constructive and destructive inputs. It acts blindly on the emotion you feed it, whether fear or confidence. You can hack this system. By writing an exact goal and charging it through daily repetition, you force your subconscious to accept that goal as truth. Once that happens, the subconscious acts as a literal magnet. It begins identifying the people, resources, and plans necessary to translate those repetitive, emotionally charged thoughts into their exact physical equivalents. Hill actually tested this framework on his own family. His son, Blair, was born without ears. doctors diagnosed the boy as completely deaf and mute, stating he would never hear or speak. Hill flatly refused to accept that medical reality. Instead, he decided to relentlessly apply the principle of autosuggestion to his child, determined to implant the desire to hear directly into the boy's mind. Hill spent years convincing Blair that his lack of hearing was a specialized asset, one that would earn him unique opportunities and the favor of those he met. That unyielding belief manifested physically. Driven by a fierce desire for a normal life, Blair eventually tested an experimental bone conduction hearing device. Because he hadn't accepted a life of silence, he found that he could perceive sound vibrations directly through his skull, unlocking the auditory world for the first time. He then took that physical disadvantage and built a career around it, working closely with the manufacturer of his hearing device to bring the technology to thousands of other hearing-impaired people. The ultimate takeaway of Hill's research is that thoughts are things. The physical world, no matter how permanent or unyielding it seems, will eventually bend to the dominant thoughts of the subconscious mind. You are the master of your fate. The next time you face a massive roadblock or a crushing temporary defeat, remember that friction almost always peaks right before a breakthrough. Whatever you do, do not stop 3 feet from